Hey guys, Jason here with a word to the wise. It's Monday, Labor Day. I've been wanting to make a video just on some ideas, some points, and I have a new person I work with, and it just, running over these thoughts of just a lot of thoughts, a lot of pointing to truths through trying to prove the falsehoods, and you just can't. And so, if you haven't heard, right now, supposedly on the ISS, the two astronauts are trapped up there. And this is being reported on the Christian Broadcast Network, of all places. And listening to them interviewing a church pastor from Texas and saying, oh, well, they see and know things that we don't know. And I'm like, oh, I'm sure they do. But trying to just debunk a lot of things. And it's just like, it's the obvious questions that nobody talks about. And it all just kind of gets like a, well, you don't understand answer, which is just the most annoying thing from people that are blind. And I get it, you're blind. NASA is cool. I love those cool t-shirts. I would love to have one, but at the same time, I would never ever wear one or support them because I can't prove that anything about them exists in reality. It's all something. I'm just getting to the end of The Truth is Stranger Than Fiction, and he points out a great point, which is he goes into a lot of old videos, and I think this was from the 70s, and it dives into the 80s a little bit too ahead, but it's that the Apollo program, and when they had that iconic footage of them going over the Atlantic, and then that moon shot, that's when they really started to boost up this whole, we need to protect the planet, this and that, which goes into, I believe it's 1 John, I can't remember which chapter in 1 John, but, do not love the world. And it's not saying I don't think so much as the world in a whole, but those in the world. If you sit here and just try to save yourself in the world, and see that it can be interpreted many different ways, and maybe it does have many different interpretations all in one collective, that God was trying to point out is don't get caught up, don't get lost in the world, because the world loves its own, and you are not of this world. Just a lot of paraphrasing here, and I'm trying to move fast because I just went to work and did a lot of jazz, and I'm trying to hit a couple little stores before we go home and just relax for the day. It's been a busy weekend. So kind of moving on still, these astronauts trapped in space. So this was a conversation I was having recently, and it was pointing out, it's like, well, imagine a scuba diver. A scuba diver goes underwater. He has a tank that fits only on his back. It's about 3 feet long. It weighs a lot to hold that compressed air and be safe enough to not break, explode, because all the pressure inside. And I think you have to have 2 tanks to almost go safely for about an hour. And I think one tank lasts about a half an hour. You can look it up and see if I'm wrong, and maybe it's twice that amount. I'm not sure, but you have a limited amount. So you're on the ISS. That thing's been up there for over 25 years or more, and you would have to have a constant, imagine like a propane tank that only turns on when you turn on your stove or uses hot water heat, or maybe even heat in your home, but you have to get that tank constantly refilled. So now imagine it's a constant flowing tank that is putting air into them. And you could say, oh, well, they have all this technology of rebreathers and things like that filter the carbon and reuse the air that's getting expelled and da-da-da-da-da. But notice that they never say like, well, we have these cool plants or an algae wallpaper that constantly is refiltering air and putting it in, which goes into the same thing I'm thinking about. They're going to have these new gardening systems because they're going to say that, farm is unsustainable, the carbon footprint doesn't measure up, doesn't work. We want to have these silos that have all these tall footprints instead of wide footprints. that can do all this stuff with less energy consumption. Even though the sun is free, water comes out of the air. You'd have to make artificial light, which then you'd have to power through what? More energy. You're going to have water then delivered through these systems to then water these plants. And isn't it interesting how they're talking about how carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide are like this great pollutant? And it's like, never do you ever see, if they have some closed greenhouse, that we pump in carbon dioxide because it's good for the plants. They make air and they eat that. But that's why I've always thought with the whole tree situation, never have you ever seen which tree puts out better oxygen than another. The study's not there. Here, this is how long it takes for a tree to make a whole vacuum chamber silo. We'll take a big gigantic potted tree, we're going to stick it in this vacuum chamber, we're going to fill it full of carbon dioxide, and we're going to see how long it takes for that tree to make the entire silo into an air chamber. Look it up. You won't find it. Why? Questionable. Look at the Book of Enoch, and I just wonder if air is just one of those things that just gets pumped into our world naturally. It's not some undersea algae, it's not rainforest, and it's not forest. Because I live in New England, and I'll tell you what, if you go into New Hampshire, the entire area is covered in trees. To say that we could ever use all those trees, look at Minnesota. I've been to so many places where you just see massive forests. And to think that if you had Home Depot go in there and start chopping them down to make lumber, it would take them forever to do it. Anyway, moving on still. Seeing these astronauts that are supposedly trapped in space, seeing how many sci-fi movies we've ever watched, like Aliens and what have you, that when things go south, you jump into the evacuation chamber and it launches you out into space, and you safely float down to Earth in some sort of manner, but not a part of the space station. Never been thought of, maybe we should make some sort of a just in case. I mean, with all the space garbage and satellites that are flying around constantly, how do you maintain all of that and then have it be safe to have a gigantic space station with solar panels and one air leak? Do they have automatic airlocks? Where do they get their water, though? They're constantly drinking their urine. Great, but air would be that one thing that you can't sit there and say that we have plenty of air supply up here. And if they're having deliveries made to them that supply them with air, water, food, little things that you constantly see when it's like, some sort of football season. Oh, here's the Super Bowl winners and we already have the shirts on. Isn't that just interesting? How we've already got all these things in hand, and we just thought that'd be great. But it's the technology of how things work up there with them that you don't get. And it's like, I don't care. You guys can bounce around water bubbles and that's all you guys seem to do. And you talk about, well, we're looking at gardening and how things reproduce and how things handle zero gravity. It's like, we have Earth. And you guys are constantly trying to sit there and make it sound like we're going to somehow utilize this technology that will never be used, because you'll never make a station big enough to supply people in Earth to go to Mars or do any of that stuff. You can't even get back to the moon for a camping trip. So quit the bull crap. But looking at the Bible, looking at Revelation, looking at when not so much the seals, but when the trumpets begin, look at the list of how many things are earth, whether it be metaphors or physical. The waters, the things that are in the waters, how the waters can pollute and then cause poison. Look at how the skies and the sun is blocked out and it causes issues. Look at the pit and the smoke. Look at all these wildfires that are happening, and what are they doing? They're pumping all this stuff into the air. That also gives them a media to then have things collect to that, like moisture, and clouds can then form from that kind of a media. causes also the pollution. They say that, oh, look at all the pollutants that man is causing, which never, since I was in the 80s, it was all about greenhouse gases and all this stuff, and they told us all the problems, but they didn't have a way of fixing it because it cost too much. And that was 30, 40 years ago, and here we are now in the future, and they're like, oh, we have to stop and make things better because of the greenhouse gases. They don't call it greenhouse gases and all that stuff. And I mean, you just sit there and you stand back and you look at things and you try to tell people, doesn't it just seem odd? Do you really believe that the space agencies of the world now, everybody's got a space agency, it could be the poorest country on earth, and it's like, oh, Nigeria, and they just landed on the moon. It's like, come on. Like, how long it took us to just build a rocket to get up into space, supposedly? And you got all these countries all around the world that are just doing it at will. And we can't find a way to go back to the moon when everybody else that has not had this technology, that's doing it on their own, can now all get to space. They're all going to the moon. China, India, I think South Korea, Russia. There's European countries now. There's African, I think. South America. I mean, everybody's got this. And what does it do? It taxes the people so that we can continue and build up a technology so that if one day, it hits the fan, that we can all get onto the giant Noah's Ark spaceship and get out of here. But it causes people to have faith in these systems versus God and say, you know what? I don't care about what you guys are trying to do. It's not for me. I don't need you. But they won't listen to that. They need you to be on board and do as you're told. So how does that happen? Look at these wars that are kind of building up around the world here and there. A lot of protests again. It could just be for the voting and the current political climates. But I feel that it's going to somehow elevate as the days and the months goes on, especially through September. Football season starting, and that's one of the best Roman circus times, I believe, that they utilize, because they'll just keep pumping all those blue tag for that timepiece land. We need to cyberbullying and all these things we start talking about. This is the time where they pump those commercials out a lot. And I'm sure with all the AI controlled technologies and stuff like that, that's when a lot of this censorship is going to be really hitting the fan. There again, showing the commercials of why we need to all be a unity and not have this kind of thing. And we'll see. I'm going to leave it at that. I'm sure I have many more things I'd love to talk about, but there's just so much. But how's the political climate going to go? Who's going to win? Who's going to move on possibly to more of a world stage? Who's going to get, the blame for, this? Is it, one person wins, it's going to cause the other side to then go up against them? That's why I think they're building such a side on against side thing right now, is because they really, 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 really want there to be somebody wins and the other side is going to be there for the next 4 years, constantly against the who won. Kamala, gets booted out, and all of a sudden they bring in, Michelle, or they bring in that guy from California, and it's like anybody in their right mind thinks that any of those guys should win because of something they've done. Look at how they've done their jobs over the last 4 years, and look at their climate. Look at California. How many people evacuated out of California because of money, current, the insurance, I'm sure, is probably the biggest thing, but, poor environment for living. Not saying that California doesn't have great food and water and all that stuff, but I mean, Lake Powell drying up and all that, and they can't seem to sit there and figure out a way to then bring in rain clouds, and they sit there and that whole thing with India, I don't think you can really talk about how they had snow and over rain and how they designed that. Heard that was a strikeable thing. So I'm just going to leave it at that before I say too much, but check out, Days of Noah had a video, not with, he had the Spiritual Hulk and Mo Fax and all those guys, but he had another video he did on that. I think it was the Very Weird series, and it was very good. And then this last one from The Truth is Stranger Than Fiction. He always puts out great work, and it's very sound. And again, hopefully on point preparedness is doing good out there, and he's okay and comes back, because I really miss him. I know that he loves to point out a lot of political things, and he's very wise. So hopefully we'll see him again. But I'll leave it at that. Just a word of the wise, guys. God bless. Hopefully you guys had a great weekend, and I'll see you next time.